Alexandria is a violinist and singer-songwriter based in New York City, originally from Columbus. She has her bachelor and master's degrees in violin performance. Since graduating, she has been all over the nation, including with Matt Jones Orchestra, through which she's had the opportunity to perform at the Hollywood Bowl, the Kennedy Center, and NPR's Tiny Desk. She has shared the stage with classical musicians like Yo-Yo Ma and Anthony McGill, and also hip-hop R&B legends like John Legend, The Roots, PJ Morton, and No Name. Recently, you just had a performance of Vivaldi's Seasons Recomposed with Bach Magnificat. I'd love to hear a little bit how that went, and also your upcoming performance with Orchestra Noir and Rick Ross.
hmm
I'd love
Yeah,
to hear about those two things.
of course. So, with the Max Richter, that was with the Unsung Collective, which is a great choir in New York City. It's a majority Black and Brown ensemble. And it was my first time playing with the ensemble. I really enjoyed it, and I've been dying to play that Max Richter Vivaldi Four Seasons. We've all heard it, at least in the context of like a commercial or something, and it's everywhere right now. So I've just been waiting for the day that I get to play it. So it was very, I guess, cathartic to finally perform it. It was really lovely. And then today, actually, so we're interviewing right before this concert with Rick Ross, who I never thought I would be playing with. I mean, I heard all of it, we all heard his, well, depending on how old you are, we all heard his songs in like middle school, elementary school. I never thought like 15 years from now I would be playing it with him on stage. It's really crazy. I've been enjoying my time here. It's here in Atlanta. I'm playing with the Orchestra Noir, which is an all-black orchestra of the American South. And I believe they were featured. Well, I don't want to speak any false facts, but they were featured on a late night show. Just not sure which one.
Awesome.
Um, but with yeah, tonight with Rick Ross is going to be a really good time. We're also playing with Mappy, who is a hip hop violinist and a choir as well. They are the Sainted trap choir, and they sound amazing. It's going to be a good time.
Awesome. Well, you're keeping busy. I'm wondering how you got into music and what drew you into this world and what your musical influences are.
I got started like most people who didn't, I guess there's two classes of people. One who got started in private lessons when they were, 3 or 4, and then the rest of us who got started through a school program. So I was given the option of any orchestra instrument through my elementary school program, and I just picked up the violin. I cannot tell you why. It's what stuck. And when I was about 15, I started taking lessons for the first time. So I had a lot of catching up to do. And from the very first lesson, I realized how much I had to catch up on and how much of a challenge it was going to be. And I'm the type of person who loves that. If you present a challenge to me and I know it's going to be really hard, but very rewarding, I'll get addicted to doing it. So the violin was sort of the first example of that. I saw how far behind I was, how much work I was going to need to put in, and it was very intimidating, but I was addicted to the challenge. So then I caught up by a miracle. I caught up just enough to get into one conservatory. I got rejected everywhere except for CCM in Cincinnati, where you go. To this day, I don't know how I got in there. I was not that good. But I did, and it was so amazing. I got all the help I needed to catch up with my peers. I was missing a lot on the education that comes with classical music. There was a lot I didn't know, but it was great. My undergrad, no complaints. I learned so much about classical music. I continued to fall in love with it through my undergrad. I'm forgetting the rest of your question.
Yeah, I guess where does that classical music training intersect with other influences? I know you're really into jazz, and I heard some samba featured in some of your music. How do all those musical influences intersect?
Um, well, with classical music, that's pretty straightforward. I suppose when I was younger, I saw it as a very separate thing. With jazz, hip hop, R&B, more popular genres, that's just what I grew up with. My dad listened to everything from classic rock to hip hop to jazz to R&B over, spanning 100 years time in music. He listened to it, and that influenced me very heavily just growing up in my household. So I've always known jazz standards and like classic R&B hits. I've just always known those. So when I learned classical music, that was sort of like a brand new world that I had no clue how it worked, and I was fascinated by it. And that training really helped me in being literate in music. Um, yeah, I would say. But with my singing, that's very heavily influenced by the jazz and the R&B that I grew up with.
Awesome. Thank you. If you could reflect back on those undergrad years that you just described, we all have these ideals for our future and what a classical career looks like. And I was wondering, how have you achieved those goals, and how have you also subverted those goals, and what has surprised you, and what have you learned along the way?
Hmm. Um, well, I started with, the traditional classical idea of classical music. I figured I would go on sort of the orchestral track. If I was lucky, maybe I'd have a chamber music career, but I knew that would be maybe a little bit harder or more obscure to obtain than an orchestra career. This was the mindset I was in when I was a freshman in college. Um, but well, so it started that way, it stayed that way for quite a while. And I got my undergrad and then my master's, and I went straight into orchestral auditions. So I played in civic right after my master's, as well as I did the diversity fellowship for Chicago Sinfonietta. And I had it in my head I was going to be, the orchestral musician. That's what I was going to do. But then the pandemic hit in 2020, and I realized I do not want that for myself. I asked myself the question. I thought, how many more times am I going to dedicate my life to Don Juan, which is, a classic audition excerpt for violins. And I realized I was like, I don't want to play another note of Don Juan. Maybe, maybe 10 years from now, I'll realize that might be an extreme or unrealistic expectation for my career. But at this moment right now, I want nothing to do with Don Juan. And if that means that I don't have a career in big orchestras, I'm okay with that. I find a lot more fulfillment from other genres, from other ways of making music outside of the traditional orchestra. And I would say for college students who are getting their degrees in classical music to explore other genres. It's fine if at the end of the day you stick with one, but you never know. What I wish so much for myself, my younger self when I was in college, was to explore other genres. Take Take an improvisation class, take multiple improvisation classes. Even if you stick with classical music, maybe you end up in a contemporary career where you're improvising contemporary classical music. Um, and just explore other genres, jazz, R&B, you name it. Even if at the end of the day you stick with one genre, you want to at least explore and know that the other genre is what you're sticking with.
Absolutely. That's great advice. I'm wondering, you mentioned during the pandemic you had this shift in wanting something else for your life and for your career. I'm really interested in how you stayed connected with your art during the pandemic and how you continued to market yourself online.
I think like most people, I was making a lot of videos of just and for me personally, I didn't have a lot of good equipment. I had very basic equipment, so I was just making videos for fun. I don't even think most people use it anymore, but there was an app that everybody was using during the initial lockdown where you could like basically, I think it was called Acapella. Yeah, we were all using that Acapella app. And it was getting a lot of attention at the time. If you used acapella, there were people that used it before 2020, but it wasn't like a very influential thing. All of a sudden you made an acapella video in 2020 and you would get thousands of views. So that's how I got started with the idea of exploring other things. I was lucky enough to have a teaching job where I had access to multiple instruments, so I brought home a cello, and a viola. And I just like, I literally, I don't have the videos up anymore because they weren't that good, but there's videos of me, using the acapella app with multiple instruments, just trying to do covers of different genres. And that's when I started singing as well. And I think that's where social media like kept me connected with other musicians and with the outside world, was that acapella app. Not to plug a brand, but
Who would have known?
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, I wanted to know if you've actually ever had a correlating career. It sounds like you've taught before.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that has supplemented your passion for performing?
I would say in music, I'm a little all over the place right now. I'm definitely in a period of transition, which had me cautious to do this interview because I feel like I might be doing a little too much right now. I was teaching at one point. I decided that's the one thing that needs to go right now. Um, so right now I'm between singing, playing the violin. I also am a Baroque musician. I do historically informed performance. Um, that's yeah, those I would say those are my, I guess, pillars of supplemental performance. Yeah.
That's awesome. Let me see. I guess I wanted to also know about your stage name Ace, where that came from,
Mm-hmm.
why you use it. I guess more of self-marketing.
Yes. I use a stage name to sort of keep separate my role as a singer-songwriter. I just felt it was kind of confusing to use one name for everything from the violin. I do so much on the violin. I play in orchestras, I play in chamber ensembles. I will do just about anything on the violin. But it just felt confusing to use one name when I'm sort of trying to create this personality as a singer songwriter, doing very different genres that really have nothing to do with classical music. And
Okay,
that so
awesome.
that's why I chose to go with the stage name. The stage name itself was a nickname that I very briefly had when I was a baby. I'm discovering now that a lot of people use that stage name.
But you're the best ace out there, so that's
Oh,
awesome.
thank you.
I'm wondering if you've found that your identity has ever shaped your career and the choices that you make within it. Specifically, I guess you talked about your background in genres and how
Mhm.
that's informed your music, your identity, your name.
Mhm. Um, yes, yes, most of the time I would say my identity does, especially with recent decisions to sort of leave the traditional orchestra field. I just felt that specifically with like historically classical music as well as Baroque music, as much as I love those genres and have a very deep passion for them, I felt that I was sort of worshiping a relic with that traditional European uh, lifestyle. But with music of today, with contemporary music, with jazz, hip hop, and R&B, that is more music that I come from the Black American community, as well as, I mean, just the African diaspora in general. It feels more fulfilling and it feels more like I am feeding into the voice of now and the voice of where I come from if I give more to those genres rather than classical and Baroque.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you've ever experienced or you've had a time in your career where you've had to lean into your empowerment and lead into your agency as an individual and as an advocate for yourself, if there's ever been any instances that you can remember.
Mm, no, I think this might have been one of the questions I blanked on.
That's okay. No worries at all. We can move on to the next one. I think we talked about social media. I'm wondering if you have any tips for artists who want to get more audiences online.
Mhm.
What would you suggest is a good way to market yourself and do your art online?
Um, so this is sort of advice that I need to apply to myself. So definitely don't look to my social media for an example. But what I would say, what I need to change, and what would be good advice is to have a brand, I guess, or sort of a, a vibe. People want to see like what you're about. They don't want to see, food posts and travel posts. People do want to see that, but if you're trying to build a following, you have to stick with one thing for a while, because of the algorithm. It's really going to help you out if you just stick with that one thing. And the second, um, I guess, advice I would give is to just get rid of the shame that comes with constantly posting. I don't allow myself to post a lot because I think, oh, that's annoying. But I need to get over myself and I just need to post more if an online following is your goal. Right now, I'm not like really digging into that because it would be helpful and I do need to eventually invest in that, but it just hasn't been the first thing on my list of goals right now. But yes, have like a one thing, have a niche, and post a lot and get over it. Don't worry about annoying people, just post a lot.
Awesome, great advice. I'm wondering, I'm ruminating back on the thing that you said. You said you didn't feel like the space of Baroque and classical music always really, it was where your energy was best spent. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering if there's something that these white heteronormative spaces could do to show more allyship or to create spaces that feel safer and feel more open to specifically composers and artists of color.
Mhm. Um, I won't say too much on that. Um, I do feel like sometimes, although it is well intentioned, we often ask an artist who identifies within a minority, um, whether they're a person of color or LGBTQ, we often look towards that person to speak for the entire community that they are a part of. So it gets a little tricky and there's a lot of pressure under the answers. So I
Absolutely.
won't say much. But I will say that I think at the end of the day, people of a minority or people of a marginalized community are just looking to be treated the same as, their white cis hetero counterparts. Um, I've always thought that music is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how you look, where you're from, um, how you identify, you're here to make good music. That is the goal. So I think at the end of the day, that's what people are looking for, is for music to truly be the great equalizer, and it shouldn't matter. You shouldn't be discriminated for, again, based on the community you come from.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Well, I think I want to kind of end by asking you what makes you feel successful and what brings you joy and what makes you feel empowered.
Hmm. I feel successful when I'm making three times the rent. I don't, we don't want to associate money with our passions, but we live in a capitalist society and the rent is due on the first. So I feel very successful when I've not only paid the rent, but I've saved money. Um, and what were the next two?
When do you feel joy? What brings you joy?
Oh, uh, things that bring me joy: making music with my close friends, my loved ones, um, taking time away from music, a good vacation.
That's the one.
Yeah, don't be scared to take a break. It's always going to be there. So don't be scared to take a break.
To reel it back in, what makes you feel empowered?
Mm. I feel empowered when I feel seen, by my colleagues and by any, I guess, organization that I work for. When I feel seen, I feel empowered.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, beautifully said. It's such a pleasure talking with you. And thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to following you on your career and wherever that takes you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.